Hi everyone and welcome to this very special Halloween astrology and tarot guidance brought to you by 1millionnights.com. Now this is a really special event because not only do we have Halloween tomorrow, but we also have a blue full moon taking place in the sign of Taurus, which means that it is the second full moon in a month. And that in itself is pretty rare, and the fact that it falls exactly on Halloween is even more magical, mystical, and from an astrological perspective, it is exactly conjunct Uranus, planet of truth and revolution, and that adds a whole new dimension onto it. Now in this first part of the guidance, I'm going to be speaking about the astrology behind it, because from an astrological perspective, it is really a big deal given the fact that the moon on itself, it is extremely strong and powerful in the sign of Taurus, her exalted sign so to speak. But this conjunction with Uranus is not very comfortable because the dominant force here is definitely Uranus, a planet which is not able to bring forward its highest qualities in the very traditional and almost rigid earth sign of Taurus. Now Uranus is speed, it is instant, it is very very quick energy, while Taurus is the exact opposite. So whenever Uranus activates in this manner in the sign of Taurus, well, it can bring forth a massive shock, an earthquake so to speak, and because Taurus rules our value systems, well, it can definitely be a financial, a political, and a social earthquake, but at the same time, there is a very small chance to trigger very strong earth activities, even if not in a very physical sense, as in an earthquake, volcano. Even though that is not excluded, it can simply spike the Schumann resonance. So this astrological cocktail is a very revolutionary, rebellious, unsettling, slightly anxious one, because the moon just pulls all the emotion to the surface, but at the same time there is Uranus which stirs it up, agitates it, and basically causes like a whirlpool of emotions for us to experience. And this can play out as experiencing a lot of different emotions, even some contradictory in their nature at the same time. So there is a level of multi-dimensional perception and emotional triggers to this energy. But of course we cannot ignore the fact that the moon and Uranus is illuminated by the sun from the sign of Scorpio, and that is also a even more powerful unconscious energy. Now naturally all of this leads to our transformation. The transformation of our value systems, the transformation of our unconscious patterns, the evolution, the mutation, a profound change of how we perceive the world. And chances are that this is going to be one of those moments where it is highlighted to us, regardless in which manner, may it be inner forces, maybe a moment where you sit down with yourself and you have a powerful epiphany, or a moment of sudden realization, or you converse with other people, or maybe you see an article on social media or the TV or anything like that. But this is where it becomes that much more obvious to all of us without exception that there is simply no going back to the old normality. That is gone forever, and it is just a simple memory right now. We cannot live, we cannot experience life the way we used to. Everything changed already, and that change is permanent, even though it doesn't really have a stable part already. We haven't stepped into the new, we just basically observing the ruins, the collapse, the fall of the old order, but this is a very necessary change. Uranus is going to be staying in this part of the sky until 2026. And each and every time when Uranus is in this very rigid, traditional, but ultimately stable sign of Taurus, well, it changes the way we perceive values, the way we trade, the way we go about exchange, what value we attribute to certain things. Maybe they be inner things, outer things, for example, self-esteem, what lost its value, and of course, whatever has to take its place. Because Uranus is a planet of upgrade. It is the new, it is the next thing. It is stepping into the future. So all of those elements which are ruled by Taurus, for example, currency, banking systems, or for example, what pleasure, what the excitement of the five senses means for us personally and of course collectively as well. All of that is upgrading, all of that is changing. The old is becoming just a memory and something totally new, visionary and revolutionary is taking its place. But all of this process is not easy, it is rather painful, and a lot of times it is associated with really strong world crisis, especially economically. For example, the last time Uranus traversed the sign of Taurus was the Great American Depression, which ultimately changed our world profoundly, and it changed it through a lot of suffering, through a lot of conflict, but all of that was necessary for us, this generation, to have everything that we have in the world today. For example, technology, healthcare systems, and right now I'm not really talking about the COVID situation, but generally speaking, all of us have a much greater life expectancy, illnesses and diseases and maybe genetic flaws which had no hope at that time, today in today's world can be treated and are not as lethal and as dangerous and as limiting as they were back then. So there was a lot of pain, a lot of suffering, a lot of limitations, and exactly as the name says it, depression associated, especially collective depression. But ultimately it is led to this, and now the wheel turns once again, and all of us are heading into the new, and this new is going to be born over time, so it's not something instantaneous as much as Uranus would like it to. But in the sign of Taurus, it needs time, it needs to go through its natural process, because also Taurus is associated with nature and how nature works. So we can only expect this new to be experienced, to be lived in its stable, grounded version after the year 2026. And the reason I spoke about all of this is because each and every full moon, regardless of how special and rare it is, has revelatory, illuminating qualities to it, exposing secrets or providing powerful epiphanies, information, the light of truth reaching us, especially with Uranus involved. So one way or another, all of us are going to be aware of the times that we are living and are going to be aware of where exactly it is that all of us are heading into. Because even though the future itself, under such a very powerful and rare and never experienced before astrological sky, is totally mysterious and unknowable, but what we can know is that by looking at the past cycles, we just know, the big picture of what exactly is going on and the future that we are stepping into. One way or another, as we resolve this crisis, as we cope, as we survive it, all of our lives, especially collectively, are going to be upgraded. And, the inner changes, where all of our value system change internally first of all. And this is so very symbolic because this was the social distancing part. This is where we had to be separated. we had to be cut off. Our interhuman connections had to be severed one way or another, so that individually we can process what all of this massive change means for us personally, and the future lifestyle and the values we would like to experience and have in the future. So, regardless of what triggered it, how it was triggered, the karmic essence of this social distancing is still the same. We have to process this individually, because just in the month of December, so right around the corner, on the 21st of December, Jupiter and Saturn meet in the sign of Aquarius, and that basically opens the gates for all of us into the age of Aquarius, where it is all about the individual. Yes, absolutely. It is also humanitarianism, interhuman connections, all of us acting as one single living organism, but the primordial structure of that is the individual, and it is the individual which is going to have the greatest value, and the rights and, uniqueness, preferences, opinions, etc. of the individual are going to be protected. The whole society, the whole interhuman collective is going to revolve around the value of the individual. So before we enter that era, all of us have to decide who we are, what our individual qualities are, what our values are as individuals, and at the same time also what it is that we cannot accept in our lives, who we are absolutely not, and we do not want to become that. So, there is a duality to it. We have to experience everything at the same time in a rather quantic fashion, because Uranus and also the sign of Aquarius is all about quantum physics, and that is going to be a big theme of the future, a future which is knocking at our door right now. Because just in 2024, Pluto is also going to enter the sign of Aquarius, and that will officially start the age of Aquarius, this important cycle in humanity's history and future. So the reason I have spoke about this is because this is one of the big themes that this full moon in Taurus is definitely going to illuminate, both inside of us as individuals, but also in our collective, local community or social media networks, etc. The future is going to be a major theme here. And this is exactly why all of our emotions, our deepest desires, the moon in Taurus, whatever we wish on a soul level to experience here on Earth, so Taurus, all of this is going to become a major theme, like it or not. It is simply going to be pulled to the surface. So both our lives as individuals, but also collectively, especially on the political scenes, the world stage, we can experience a massive quake, tsunami of feelings, ideological battles, value system battles, opinion battles, also on social media. And, this unsettling energy is actually meant to motivate us to align with something that we find to be the most valuable inside of us. May that be a principle, may that be a feeling, may that be a desire, may that be our own identities or our self-worth. So this whirlpool of feelings and energies are actually trying to enliven the deepest core of our consciousness. Especially, the sun illuminating all of this from the sign of Scorpio, the sign of the Phoenix. This is almost like a psychological rebirth. The full moon in Aries was about the death of the ego and our wounds and our old self, all of our, incompetence, where we were powerless, where we were helpless. So the ego and that identity died one way or another. And this Scorpio sun is reviving everything. It is stirring up our ashes, our, dormant energies for us to reform. So even though it can be a little bit anxious, unusual, very, very intense, it is like a rebirth. And when the birth canal is very narrow, the birth process itself is not very comfortable. Now at the same time, there is an other astrological element happening. The sign of Taurus, 26 degrees of Taurus, hosts a very controversial star, fixed star in astrology, respectively Algol, which is like a demonic star according to the astrologies of ancient times. So it is regarded as malevolent, evil, not so beneficial, and it holds almost a perfect trine with Saturn from Capricorn, which means that whatever is corrupt, whatever is impure, whatever would try and prevent this revolution, evolution, upgrade of our value systems is gonna expose itself. And ultimately Saturn is also judgment. Saturn is karmic and even earthly justice, especially in the sign of Scorpio. So something, especially maybe a world leader, an organization, someone who pulls the triggers, or someone who forcefully tries to prevent the upgrade of our value systems, Algol and Taurus, is gonna expose itself, and naturally it's gonna be judged by all of us. But of course, judged can be interpreted in a psychological way as well, where it just reaches our awareness, we can perceive it for what it is, and it can be as simple as that. Now, other astrologers associate this trine with the fall of a world leader, but I'm not sure how that can play out. It can have something to do with the elections in America, because they do happen under a stationary Mercury, where Mercury just stands still in the sky after being retrograde, and that can mean a lot of controversy, that can mean delays, that can mean system errors, technical difficulties, or having to re-elect everything. Now, speaking about Mercury, under this sky, we are going to have a really active Mercury freshly entered, retrograded, better said, into the sign of Libra, where it perfects the squares it held with Saturn and Pluto once again. And that can mean a lot of things. For example, it can mean decision time, but this is where the decision has to be final regarding our relationship, our partnerships, our one-on-one alliances, contracts, even trials, justice systems. It can play out as diplomatic negotiations on the world stage. But of course, since Mercury is retrograde, this isn't anything new. Chances are, like a week or 2 weeks ago, when Mercury was going still direct, and it was in this place in the sky, and it held the same squares with Saturn, Pluto, and Jupiter, all of us had some kind of crisis, some kind of perhaps conflict, either intellectual conflict, power games, power struggles with our partners or people who belong into our 7th house. In other words, very, very close people to us, or people who we have contracts or agreements with. Or it could have simply played out as the imminent need to make a decision or to take a stand, align with an opinion or align with something, so that those around us can actually figure out what we want, or our positions, our opinions. And this is where that theme is coming back into our lives. So we will have to find clarity and, make a decision. Sign the papers, sign the contracts, or at least try and figure out what we truly want. But of course, we have a lot of help in the sky, because Venus is also in this part of the sky, and she rules the sign of Libra. So our emotions, our philosophies, our life views, everything that we love, not just passionately through the heart space, but also, mentally, intellectually, as in principles, philosophies, etc., those are going to be empowered and they will naturally help us. Following the heart and, standing from a place of equilibrium where the rational part of ourselves and the heart space is in balance, they know what they want, comes with greater ease. And if it doesn't, well, Venus also rules the sign of Taurus, so that means that this full moon is going to help us and guide us towards that. Now, another side of this energy has much to do with actually Halloween or Samhain itself, because on one hand it's Scorpio season, and the other hand the sun opposes Uranus, which means unexpected shocks, surprises. Some might be even delightful. It can be unexpected romantic surprises. It can be people from the distant past or partners from the distant past returning into our lives. It can also be unexpected financial gains, unexpected offers, unexpected opportunities. Now, of course, these are all very positive, but since Uranus is in the picture, they will require a compromise. In the most favorable case, for us to step out from our comfort zones and do something that we have never done before, something totally new. Like, let me just give you an example. The sign of Scorpio also rules death and something that we owe to others or what we share with other people. So it can represent an unexpected financial opportunity, which is really, really good and positive, but you might have to use that to erase a debt. So yes, it is a great celestial help, so to speak. It can be a lucky energy, but you might not really benefit from it physically, as in you cannot spend it on yourself, but the comfort of not having that in your life is also more than worth it, and that can be the compromise, that can be the shock. Or it can play out the opposite way, where you might have planned maybe let's say some kind of business or lucrative purpose for a lot of years, and it never came to fruition, and all of a sudden something just pops up in your life, but the condition for it is for you to take a loan, and there's no problem with that, but taking a loan under these very unstable economic times is a big risk in itself, so again, having to step out from your comfort zone. And last but not least, the moon conjunct Uranus opposing the sun, while it can definitely represent a lot of unusual paranormal activities, it can represent the supernatural entering our world, because the veil between the worlds is that much thinner anyways at this time, and it's also blue moon, and at the same time Pluto, the ruler of the occult, is conjunct Jupiter, so Jupiter amplifies all of this. So if you're a paranormal investigator or are passionate about unusual things, mysteries, uncovering the past, communicating with spirits or the other side, so to speak, well, this can be a really, really good period for you, because it is going to be basically everywhere. And since Uranus rules the Schumann resonance, well, it will electrify, it is going to magnetize everything. And a full moon in Taurus basically just opens up our perceptions in such a way where we can even perceive at this time what in normal conditions usually we might never ever perceive, or we might simply be ignorant. So this is a really, really good time. Now the second part of this guidance is naturally the tarot reading, and this is so very unusual because the High Priest card appears twice, and of course I used 2 separate decks, that's why it's even possible. And what's really ironic is that the astrological correspondent, the symbolism of the High Priest, is actually the sign of Taurus, and the third card is the moon. So what a direct way of basically telling us that this full moon in Taurus is going to be full of surprises. Now, what does all of this mean? Well, the moon card on one hand can symbolize our unconscious minds and all of the power that lies in there. Now the High Priest card is exactly that power, but manifested in matter. So basically, our faith, our principles, our woven unconscious patterns which are stable, which have already crystallized deep within us, basically rule our lives. And how do they rule it? Well, they are the traditions, the customs, the routines, the principles that we follow. So basically those are the guiding forces in our lives. And yes, they are inner ones because either they are deeply rooted in our minds or they can be spiritual or religious, but every choice or the majority of choices that we make are based upon them. For example, education can be seen as something which has to do with the High Priest and the moon as well, because the moon is the sign of the mother, the High Priest is the father naturally. So, our education, whatever was programmed into us at home, at school, higher education, etc., well, that creates a part of our identity and who we are, how we manage things, how we manage our lives, who it is that we are. So the main message of these cards and these two dual but at the same time harmonious energies, because one is the expression of the divine masculine and the other one is the divine feminine, especially their spiritual connotations, because the material and earthly representation would be the emperor for the divine masculine and the empress for the divine feminine. But funny enough, exactly their spiritual correspondent appears. So how very fitting for Samhain, so in other words Halloween, and for a very special full moon like this where the veil between the worlds is that much thinner. So on one hand, this can suggest a divine union where the masculine and feminine energies, especially their spiritual connotations, unite and they join forces to revive us, to resurrect us, to rebirth us. This is where a new value system can be born inside of us, and before it becomes thought as in mental, before it's even perceived, before it becomes conscious or even unconscious in that manner, it is just a spiritual energy, as above, so below. So there might be a great union taking place in the sky, birthing something new, which basically energizes us, possesses us in a most favorable sense, and afterwards it becomes like an unconscious pattern, and then a thought, and then it becomes reality. So without a shadow of a doubt, the main message of this combination of cards is that something new is being born, but it is just being created. Maybe the light of the full moon is what showers that new onto our plane, our earthly plane, maybe even physically through the photons. Another way of interpreting is, well, it's very simple. Taurus is the sign of manifestation, at least one of it. So simply said, whatever we believe very, very strongly can now manifest in our lives in a very direct manner. And since the High Priest is a very earthly card, well, it can represent contracts, it can represent something very palpable, like our places within the community, organizations, the hierarchical chain. It can also represent any kind of help, which is also material. So whatever that we need in our lives, that moon card, and that need is also unconscious, so it's truly authentic, well, it can come into our lives in a very surprising manner, as if triggered by the hand of faith, or whatever we believe in spiritually or even religiously can now enter into our sphere of awareness and produce effects. Now, yet another expression of these tarot cards has to do, the divine masculine and feminine. It can represent a divine union where opposites attract, or that which is fated has to find one another, like the quantum entanglement theory. So it can mean that soulmates, people who are destined to meet in this life, people who are destined to be together, or form an alliance, or form something for the long-term future, the high priest, or maybe marriage, that is one of the symbolism of the high priest, can finally meet each other. But it might not be as, highly romantic or miraculous as we might expect this event to be playing out in our lives, because the moon card, it also has a very shadowy quality to it, where it is a little bit confusing, it is a little bit weird, it is a little bit unusual, but it gets the job done, and that is exactly the magic of all of it. Well, thank you so much for listening. This concludes your Halloween guidance. I really hope that you enjoyed it, and remember, if you'd like a personal reading, just log on to 1millionnights.com and find your dedicated advisor. Thank you again. We wish everyone a very magical and mysterious Halloween or Samhain. Have wonderful celebration, or in other cultures, a very peaceful and spiritual and simply beautiful Day of the Dead. Until next time, bye for now.